Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in Freshman English, and we turn now in our study of Unit 6 and the Hero and the Hero's Quest to the last of the titles that will be presented in your textbook. This one is Perseus. Now, if you're with me on page 1216, page 1217, we're introducing ourselves at 2B, so write this down, to myth. And one of the most influential set of myths in Western thought is, of course, the stories from the ancient Greek and Roman culture. We call that the Greco-Roman culture, okay? One of the most famous people to ever be able to tell us about all these stories was a woman named Edith Hamilton. There's a picture of her on 1217. Note your dates, 1867 to 1963. Notice a little bit about her. Edith Hamilton was a groundbreaking educator who helped found the Bryan Mall School in Baltimore, the first college preparatory school for women. She taught a generation of young women not to limit their goals simply because they were not men. After leaving After leaving the school, Hamilton began writing articles about ancient Greece, which she later turned into a book called The Greek Way in 1930. Her other books include The Roman Way 1932, and then maybe her most famous book, Mythology 1942, which are both beautifully crafted retellings of the Greek myths. You can go to learnstrong.net in the freshman folder, and actually I have lectures that I've provided for you over every one of the different chapters of Edith Hamilton's classic mythology. And there, I've already kind of treated some of the reading that we're about to see here now, Perseus, the reading which for us will start on page 1225. So I hope that you're there. Now, let's think for just a moment at 2B. That's where we often like to start, yes? Let's think about the hero. Now, we have met a number of heroes. We're going to meet another one in Perseus here. We know all kinds of heroes. Let's just start listing some of those heroes at 3A. Who are some of the famous heroes of epics? Well, obviously, we've already met Odysseus, so we want to write him down, no doubt. As part of our study of the Troy Tale, we met Achilles, didn't we? We met the very important hero of the Trojan side, Aeneas, another famous hero. Here we're going to get Perseus. Now, if you know anything about Hercules, then you already know a little bit about the kind of Greek heroes. Perseus is a classic example of this. What is it that defines a hero? Two things for sure. One, always they have interesting parentage, where they come from. Two, they always have to overcome all kinds of major struggles. Here we'll think about Pecos Bill as being kind of compared in this regard. Major struggles or fights or battles, and they will be in many ways then defined by their struggles. I would write that down. Epic heroes, mythic heroes, are always defined by their struggles. They fight against something, they overcome that something, often it's a monster or a situation, and they come out on the other side either alive and heroic or dead and heroic. Okay? All right, let's go ahead now and enjoy our reading. 1225, just follow along.
Perseus by Edith Hamilton. King Acrisius of Argos had only one child, a daughter, Danae. She was beautiful above all the other women of the land, that this was small comfort to the king for not having a son. He journeyed to Delphi to ask the god if there was any hope that someday he would be the father of a boy. The priestess told him no, and added what was far worse, that his daughter would have a son who would kill him. The only sure way to escape that fate was for the king to have Danae instantly put to death, taking no chances, but seeing to it himself. This Acrisius would not do. His fatherly affection was not strong, as events proved, but his fear of the gods was. They visited with terrible punishment those who shed the blood of kindred.
1226.
Perseus did not dare slay his daughter. Instead, he had a house built all of bronze and sunk underground, but with part of the roof open to the sky so that light and air could come through. Here he shut her up and guarded her. So Danae endured, the beautiful, to change the glad daylight for brass-bound walls, and in that chamber, secret as the grave, she lived a prisoner. Yet to her came Zeus in the golden rain.
All right, let's pause for a moment. First part of our story at level 1. This is very, very typical of many Greek myths. You have an interesting tension between fathers and either sons or daughters. In this case, Perseus is going to have a problem with Danae, his daughter, right? He hears from the prophet priestess at Delphi, a town in outside of Athens in Greece, that he's going to maybe have some problems if his daughter ever has a son. Her son will ultimately kill him. And so Perseus takes the daughter and puts the daughter away. This is another major motif. Let's go ahead and put this in our notes. If you know anything about the story of Tangled or Rapunzel, this motif of being hidden away somewhere. Second part of our story always seems to work out this way. You have the intervention of some force. Usually it is divine. In this case, it's going to be Zeus, who, of course, as we've said, because the gods are anthropomorphic, they can change into any kind of form. They can take the form of humans. They can take the form of rain. All right, let's keep going now. What's going to happen when Zeus gets involved? Oh, boy.
As she sat there through the long days and hours with nothing to do, nothing to see except the clouds moving by overhead, a mysterious thing happened. A shower of gold fell from the sky and filled her chamber. How it was revealed to her that it was Zeus who had visited her in this shape, we are not told, but she knew that the child she bore was his son. For a time she kept his birth secret from her father, but it became increasingly difficult to do so in the narrow limits of that bronze house. And finally, one day, the little boy, his name was Perseus, was discovered by his grandfather. "Your child!" Perseus cried in great anger. "Who is his father?" But when Danae answered proudly, "Zeus," he would not believe her. One thing only he was sure of, that the boy's life was a terrible danger to his own. He was afraid to kill him for the same reason that had kept him from killing her: fear of Zeus and the Furies who pursue such murderers. But if he could not kill them outright, he could put them in the way of tolerably certain death. He had a great chest made, and the two placed in it. Then it was taken out to sea and cast into the water. In that strange boat, Danae sat with her little son. The daylight faded, and she was alone on the sea. When in the carven chest the winds and waves struck fear into her heart, she put her arms, not without tears, round Perseus tenderly. She said, "O son, what grief is mine! But you sleep softly, little child, sunk deep in rest within your cheerless home, only a box brass-bound. The night, this darkness visible, the scudding waves so near to your soft curls, the shrill voice of the wind, you do not heed, nestled in your red cloak, fair little face." Through the night in the tossing chest, she listened to the waters that seemed always about to wash over them. The dawn came, but with no comfort to her, for she could not see it. Neither could she see that around them there were islands rising high above the sea, many islands. All she knew was that presently a wave seemed to lift them and carry them swiftly on, and then, retreating, leave them on something solid and motionless.
1227.
They had made land. They were safe from the sea, but they were still in the chest with no way to get out. Fate willed it, or perhaps Zeus, who up to now had done little for his love and his child, that they should be discovered by a good man, a fisherman named Dictys. He came upon the great box and broke it open and took the pitiful cargo home to his wife, who was as kind as he. They had no children, and they cared for Danae and Perseus as if they were their own. The two lived there many years, Danae content to let her son follow the fisherman's humble trade out of harm's way. But in the end, more trouble came. Polydectes, the ruler of the little island, was the brother of Dictys, but he was a cruel and ruthless man. He seems to have taken no notice of the mother and son for a long time, but at last Danae attracted his attention. She was still radiantly beautiful, even though Perseus by now was full grown, and Polydectes fell in love with her. He wanted her, but he did not want her son, and he set himself to think out a way of getting rid of him. There were some fearsome monsters called Gorgons, who lived on an island and were known far and wide because of their deadly power.
All right, let's pause for a moment. At level 1, so you've got an interesting story. You've got a father who takes his daughter and puts her inside of like a subterranean realm with an open area. Zeus will sleep with the girl. This is not unusual, as we know from Greek mythology. And Perseus is the one who is born. Perseus, then the son of a god, half mortal, if you will, right? Then the father, when he realizes that his daughter is with child and then ultimately has a son, worried about the prophecy, will put both of them in a boat and send them out onto the ocean. If they die oh well. And as is typical in these stories often, they're going to find land, they become foundlings, and then ultimately they're going to be kind of taken care of by Dictys. Dictys, however, has this brother who is the ruler. He's very much into Danae, but he wants to get rid of Perseus. So now we're going to have the next part of our story. Perseus is going to have a series of challenges beginning with the Gorgons, okay? So hopefully you're at level 1 now. Here comes the adventure fighting, adventure quest part of our story, all right? Here we go.
Polydectes evidently talked to Perseus about them. He probably told him that he would rather have the head of one of them than anything else in the world. This seems practically certain from the plan he devised for killing Perseus. He announced that he was about to be married, and he called his friends together for a celebration, including Perseus in the invitation. Each guest, as was customary, brought a gift for the bride-to-be, except Perseus alone. He had nothing he could give. He was young and proud and keenly mortified. He stood up before them all and did exactly what the king had hoped he would do. Declared that he would give him a present better than any there. He would go off and kill Medusa and bring back her head as his gift. Nothing could have suited the king better. No one in his senses would have made such a proposal. Medusa was one of the Gorgons. And they are 3, the Gorgons, each with wings and snaky hair, most horrible to mortals, whom no man shall behold and draw again the breath of life.
1228.
For the reason that whoever looked at them were turned instantly into stone. It seemed that Perseus had been led by his angry pride into making an empty boast. No man unaided could kill Medusa. But Perseus was saved from his folly. 2 great gods were watching over him. He took ship as soon as he left the king's hall, not daring to see his mother first and tell her what he intended. And he sailed to Greece to learn where the 3 monsters were to be found.
Now, let's pause for a moment and put this in our notes. This is a very normal and usual part of myth. Young men who go off to fight against some monster, right? And somehow define themselves by going off to fight this monster. Now you have a picture of Medusa there on 1228. What makes her horrifying is not just that she has these snakes for hair, but she also has the power to turn you into stone as she looks at you. So you got a major monster here. Of course, Polydectes is hoping that Perseus will go off and die, and that way he doesn't have to mess with the sun, etc., etc. Of course, this is going to be the defining moment. Number 2, for your notes at level 1. It always does seem to be the case that the gods and divine intervention have to help out here. In the same way as we talked about in our Troy Tales story, where Achilles needs new armor and so Hephaestus will in fact provide it for him, you're going to have the help of the gods here as well. All right, let's see what he does in his fight with Medusa. It's a famous, famous story in Greek mythology.
He went to Delphi, but all the priestess would say was to bid him seek the land where men eat not Demeter's golden grain, but only acorns. So he went to Dodona, in the land of oak trees, where the talking oaks were which declared Zeus's will, and where the Selli lived, who made their bread from acorns. They could tell him, however, no more than this, that he was under the protection of the gods. They did not know where the Gorgons lived. When and how Hermes and Athena came to his help is not told in any story, but he must have known despair before they did so. At last, however, as he wandered on, he met a strange and beautiful person. We know what he looked like from many a poem, a young man with the first down upon his cheek when youth is loveliest, carrying, as no other young man ever did, a wand of gold with wings at one end, wearing a winged hat too, and winged sandals.
Right? Hermes.
At sight of him, hope must have entered Perseus's heart, for he would know that this could be none other than Hermes, the guide and the giver of good. This radiant personage told him that before he attacked Medusa, he must first be properly equipped, and that what he needed was in the possession of the nymphs of the north. To find the nymphs' abode, they must go to the Gray Women, who alone could tell them the way. These women dwelt in a land where all was dim and shrouded in twilight. No ray of sun looked ever on that country, nor the moon by night. In that gray place the three women lived, all gray themselves and withered as in extreme old age. They were strange creatures indeed, most of all because they had but one eye for the three, which it was their custom to take turns with, each removing it from her forehead when she had had it for a time, and handing it to another. All this Hermes told Perseus, and then he unfolded his plan. He would himself guide Perseus to them. Once there, Perseus must keep hidden until he saw one of them take the eye out of her forehead to pass it on. At that moment, when none of the three could see, he must rush forward and seize the eye and refuse to give it back until they told him how to reach the nymphs of the north.
All right, so let's pause, put it at level 1. So, yeah, Perseus is in trouble. He didn't even know how to find this Medusa, this Gorgon. And then all of a sudden Hermes shows up. Hermes, the messenger god. Hermes, the one that helped, you'll remember, Odysseus on his way to go kill Circe, the witch. It was Hermes that gave Odysseus that potion so that Circe could not turn him into a pig and all of that. So Hermes is the helper god in many ways. And he says, look, you got to go on a long journey. Boy, oh boy, we're familiar with this one. Let's write that one down. To become a hero, you got to go on a long journey. Go and find these gray women. They share a common eyeball. So, get the eyeball when one of them has taken it out to put in the forehead of another. And in that moment, then, you can make a demand and get some kind of help. Now, it's always been the question, why doesn't, like Hermes just take Perseus directly to where Medusa is? No. You got to go through these challenges to define yourself in some way then as the hero. The subtext here, remember we said, we are the stories we tell, the stories we retell, the stories we accept, the stories we reject. Fundamentally, this is one of those important elements of all those great stories of heroes. You have to go through the challenge, through the fire. You have to somehow survive. It's hard, but the payoff is worth all of the hard work. So here we go now. We'll have the rest of the story as it unfolds.
He himself, Hermes said, would give him a sword to attack Medusa with, which could not be bent or broken by the Gorgon's scales, no matter how hard they were. This was a wonderful gift, no doubt, and yet of what use was a sword when the creature to be struck by it could turn the swordsman into stone before he was within striking distance? But another great deity was at hand to help. Pallas Athena stood beside Perseus. She took off the shield of polished bronze which covered her breast and held it out to him. "Look into this when you attack the Gorgon," she said. "You will be able to see her in it as in a mirror, and so avoid her deadly power." Now, indeed, Perseus had good reason to hope. The journey to the twilight land was long, over the stream of ocean, and on to the very border of the black country where the Cimmerians dwell. But Hermes was his guide, and he would not go astray. They found the gray women at last, looking in the wavering light like gray birds, for they had the shape of swans. But their heads were human, and beneath their wings they had arms and hands. Perseus did just as Hermes had said. He held back until he saw one of them take the eye out of her forehead. Then, before she could give it to her sister, he snatched it out of her hand. It was a moment or two before the three realized they had lost it. Each thought one of the others had it. But Perseus spoke out and told them he had taken it, and that it would be theirs again only when they showed him how to find the nymphs of the north. They gave him full directions at once. They would have done anything to get their eye back. He returned it to them and went on the way they had pointed out to him. He was bound, although he did not know it, to the blessed country of the Hyperboreans, at the back of the north wind, of which it is said, "Neither by ship nor yet by land shall one find the wondrous road to the gathering place of the Hyperboreans." But Perseus had Hermes with him, so that the road lay open to him, and he received that host of happy people who are always banqueting and holding joyful revelry. They showed him great kindness. They welcomed him to their feast, and the maidens, dancing to the sound of flute and lyre, paused to get for him the gifts he sought.
12:30.
These were three: winged sandals, a magic wallet which would always become the right size for whatever was to be carried in it, and most important of all, a cap which made the wearer invisible. With these and Athena's shield and Hermes' sword, Perseus was ready for the Gorgons. Hermes knew where they lived, and leaving the happy land, the two flew back across ocean and over the sea to the terrible sisters' island.
All right, here we go. The
By
fight.
great